There we go. Oh, I can unmute your mic for you. I didn't know I could do that. Hello and welcome, everybody. This is a stream that will have both of my parents in here. As we're waiting for people to filter in within the first few minutes. I know it takes a while for some people to come and click the notification and all that. But I wanted to welcome everybody and wish you all happy holidays, since we're right in the middle of them. Let's see how the chat is going.
I see a lot of my people in the chat right now. Hello, everybody. Even I have all of my European folk in here, even though it's super late for y'all. So thank you for joining.
And we can see all of your. We're streaming simultaneously on GeneaVlogger's channel and my channel, as well as both of our Twitch channels as well. And we can see all of that. For instance, there's DNA on Twitch. And we can highlight the comments and everything. Now that we have more than 50, the first thing I want to say is that we will not be able to respond to super chats very often. So, while you're welcome to send super chats, and I thank you for it, do keep in mind it will be very difficult for us to respond to them. Also, because of the wide angle on all this, we've had to do some very funky hardware stuff to get this thing working at my parents' place. But with all that being said, do let us know if there's any problems. So, I have to introduce everyone. For those who don't know me on GeneaVlogger's channel, I am known as Cypher, the Cynical Historian. I'm also Dr. Joe Hall-Patton. I am a historian, and I specialize in American violence in the Southwest. This is my mother, Colleen Hall-Patton, or also Dr. Hall-Patton. And, Mom, you want to introduce your specialty?
Sure. Should note, I am a sociologist at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and my specialty area is using quilting as a way of understanding women's lives in the mid-20th century.
And like how it fits into proto-feminism, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And this is my father, Mark Hall-Patton, the non-doctor in the family, but also most of you guys probably recognize him. And Ed, I'll let you introduce your specialty.
Okay, well, I'm the retired museum administrator for the Clark County Museum System. Was a museum administrator for 44 years for various museums in the United States. And many of you may know me from my appearances on Pawn Stars, known as the Beard of Knowledge. And I have worked in public history for all of my career. And my area is in public history. So,
well, also local history.
Oh, yes.
You ran the entire museum system here in Clark County.
Here in
Southern
Clark
Nevada.
County, in San Luis Obispo County, in California. Did the first exhibit on the history of women in Los Angeles. Founded the Anaheim Museum. Worked with museums all over the United States.
But he is technically retired now, though.
Technically.
Though you wouldn't know it given how much he works.
Retired on my own terms.
So that is the family, and the reason why my family is here is because we are simultaneously on GeneaVlogger's channel, but for those who are on my channel, this is GeneaVlogger, who actually you pronounce it GeneaVlogger.
Yeah, I pronounce it GeneaVlogger. Some people say GeneaVlogger. The idea was genealogy vlogger. Combine the words, but
I just can't stop saying GeneaVlogger.
Yeah, well, it's I always think of that movie, That Thing You Do, where they call the wonders the Oneaters. It's kind of like that sort of thing. But yeah, hello everybody. I'm Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger. I'm a genealogist. I spent some years working as an investigative genetic genealogist, solving cold case crimes and identifying unknown human remains. Now I do full-time YouTube, and especially building the family trees of well-known YouTubers like Cypher.
Which is why we're here. because he's done 2 episodes on us. And so what we're going to be doing is watching those 2 episodes and also having a bit of discussion in between of obviously we're going to be live reacting. For me, I haven't watched either of these episodes. There's my parents have one of my parents have managed to get a hold of one of them, but otherwise we haven't seen these. So this is a live reaction, and we'll also have some pertinent information coming from Jarrett, and
we'll be looking at some DNA results.
Yeah. So buckle in, everybody. I hope we're up to 81 now, so should definitely. I'm guessing we're not going to peak up more than 120 viewers, but and yes, hello everybody. It is going to be difficult for me to, and I did say this already, but since there's 30 new folks, it's going to be difficult to keep up with comments, partially because we're quite distant from the screen, and we're also reacting to a video, which means we can't do as many super chats in that. So keep that in mind. We do appreciate the super chats, but it will be difficult for us to get every single one of them. So before we get into watching the actual video, do you want to preempt it with any explanation, or?
I feel like I give a good discussion at the beginning of each video about kind of the idea of what's going into it. But for those who aren't familiar, this is part of a series I call YouTuber Family Trees, where different YouTubers have agreed to have me build their family trees. So I started building the Hall-Patton tree about 2.5, 3 years ago off of a very well built out tree that they'd already sent me. And so both of these videos will go into different lines of the family. The first one will look at the Patton line. And then for the second video, we'll be looking at the Gaffey line of the family, which is through Dr. Colleen Hall-Patton's line. So we'll be seeing both sides of the family. And at the end, I think both will kind of leave some questions of discussion that will be interesting to go over, especially with the expertises that the entire Hall-Patton family has. So I'm very excited to see all of your reactions.
Yeah, I just noticed that somebody commented, "Who's the expert here?" And it's like, all.
Yes. I think you've got them.
In terms of genealogy, that would of course be Jarrett. Although Mom does a lot of genealogy herself.
Yeah, my senior paper was using genealogy at UCI.
Really?
Yeah, it was the first coursework in a university that used genealogy and history.
Huh?
Yeah, I've told you that. You just don't remember. You need to work on your memory, son.
I want to see the paper. If you still have it.
Oh yes.
We don't get rid of much here.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, funny enough, I think we managed to get the angle just right to exclude all the piles of books. But There's literally piles of books on either side of this.
There's 20,000 in the house.
That seems like an undercount.
Yeah, that's an approximation. It's not a count.
So, shall we jump right into it then?
Let's do it.
I have to grab this screen because we'll be watching it.
You do deal with that.
We'll be watching it on tablet right here.
Wake up.
Full screen. Come on. There we go.
June 4th, 1862. Camp Henry McCullough in Victoria, Texas. The new Confederate troops of the 6th Texas Infantry Regiment had been arriving in camp since April. Texas had joined the Confederacy just a little over a year prior, but is still raising new regiments. A private in Company H, John Hiram Patton, had been recruited in April but had just arrived the day before. But John had no plans to stick around. 151 years later, his third great grandson would start a YouTube channel called the Cynical Historian. Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and on today's video,
130
we will be
years.
tracing the family tree of Joseph Hall-Patton, also known as Cypher, from the Cynical Historian. Joseph Hall-Patton, who I'll just call Cypher from now on, has been uploading videos to his channel, The Cynical Historian, since 2013, covering all sorts of topics such as history, politics, popular culture, and
Wilson! Damn it, Wilson!
And Wilson, in all his glorious stupidity,
Wilson!
Cypher's parents are Mark Hall-Patton and
I think you're the first to actually make a compilation of those.
I just had to do it. I knew I had to include
it.
And he's not wrong on those.
I just noticed, Mom, you're kind of getting cut off because of the squaring. I'll try to rotate it a little bit.
There you go.
Yes,
Do not cut off your mom.
I learned that a long time ago.
Colleen Hall-Patton. Mark Hall-Patton is a historian and retired museum director who became well known as the Beard of Knowledge on the show Pawn Stars.
If anybody would know anything about it, would be another old drum.
The guys normally call me down when they have an artifact that they want a little bit more information about.
Colleen Hall-Patton is a sociologist and anthropologist who works as an instructor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The family supplied me a well-built family tree to start from, as well.
You
It's
did the
Nevada.
you did the cardinal sin.
What did I do?
It's Nevada, not Nevada.
Okay.
You have to learn how to mispronounce names correctly when
If
you're
there's-
using them.
If there's one thing my audience knows me for, it's not pronouncing things correctly. And I'm trying to pronounce stuff from all over the world too. You should hear when I try to pronounce my Dutch.
Yeah, I understand that. I have had to do that with being on television, and you really want to work on that because, yeah, they jump
people.
on you fast.
Well, we see, the thing is, we get to see all the comments.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Which means we know all too well when we have mispronounced something.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I get people that tell me that I pronounce genealogy wrong. And that's actually a whole argument in the genealogy community. What's the proper pronunciation?
I spoke to one of the national genealogy conferences when it was here in Vegas. And yeah, I had people coming after me on that.
How else do you pronounce it?
Genealogy.
Well,
Genealogy.
Genealogy.
Genealogy. Yeah.
No, it's genealogy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyways, we should probably, we can talk about this forever.
Well as DNA tests for both Mark and Colleen. When I first spoke to Cypher about this project, I asked him if there was anything he wanted me to look into specifically in his family tree. And one thing he mentioned was he wanted to find out whether or not he actually was related to General George Patton. So I started by tracing up Cypher's Patton line, and things were going smoothly until I hit a brick wall in the 19th century with John Hiram Patton. John Hiram Patton was born about 1836 in Mississippi. His family moved to Texas while John was still a baby, and he grew up in Leon County, Texas. Thanks to the US Census, we know that by October 1860, just a little under a year before the start of the Civil War, 23-year-old John was married with a wife named Sarah Ann Lamb, a local girl who was born in Leon County. Sarah was likely 15 or 16 years old when she married John, and now 17 years old, she and John had a 1-year-old daughter named Emily. Around the country, it has become apparent that Lincoln will win the presidency, and many in Leon County are calling for secession, along with a large majority of others.
So here's a quick tip. When you start a quote like that, it's very useful to say something like, newspaper started saying something along those lines, because it will be confusing to the viewer, and I had to learn this myself. It's confusing to the viewer, especially if they're only listening, because a lot of people do that. If you don't say, that this is a quote, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. or Texans. Within months, a convention is held, with the citizens of Leon County having overwhelming support to secede from the Union, with 534 for secession and only 82 against. Texas soon joins the Confederate States in 1861, and just a year later, John Hiram Patton enlists in the Texas 6th Infantry Regiment on April 23, 1862. A look at John's Civil War service records gives us a view into his military service, which was short-lived. In the service records is a certificate of disability for discharge. This document not only confirms this was the correct John Patton, but also brings into question whether or not he really wanted to enlist. We know this is our John Patton because he is the only recorded John Patton living in Texas who was born in 1836 in Mississippi, at least the only documented one that I could find. But why is John being discharged on disability? In one section, it has said soldier has been unfit for duty the whole time with the word days crossed out. Then the commanding company officer describes John Patton's disability. Patton shot himself through the hand before he reported himself for duty. Has never done a day's duty, nor has he been in the camp but one day, and is entitled to neither bounty nor pay. And this really makes me wonder, what were the circumstances to make John go such great lengths just so that he didn't have to serve? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find anything specific.
He didn't want to. This is not unusual in the Civil War. This is not unusual. This happened a number of times. You were not. A lot of men were encouraged to enlist, and
yeah, especially in Texas, where they like later on in the war, they'd straight up start hanging, especially if you were of German ancestry. Like the second largest lynching in U.S. history happened in Texas in 1862, and it was specifically about people being disloyal to the Confederacy. So you know, there was a very real threat of violence if you did not enlist.
Yeah, the largest lynching. Well, lynching. Okay, no, I was thinking hanging, because we've got the Sioux hanging in 18.
No, this was larger than the Sioux hanging.
Yeah,
this was the Sioux hanging.
Yeah,
was
but I was thinking of the Sioux hanging, but that's not a lynching.
Yeah, and the Sioux hanging, that's only like 38. This is 52 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, but it's not the largest. The largest happened in New Orleans in the 1890s.
Right. Yeah.
And that was of Italians.
Yeah.
But
anyways, yeah. No, we need to keep going. Yeah.
Well, that's why we're here to react.
But John himself was somewhat of a mystery. Cutting back to earlier, I had mentioned that John Hiram Patton was our brick wall on the Patton line. So who were his parents? According to the tree the family supplied me, John's father was a man named Joseph Irwin Patton, who was born in 1775 in South Carolina, but died in 1843 in North Carolina. But this didn't seem to add up. If correct, Joseph would have been 61 when John was born. Plus, Joseph's death in North Carolina seems out of place, especially with John growing up in Texas. I then took a look at the oldest record that I could find for John Hiram Patton, the 1850 census. John was living in Leon County, Texas with the Scott family and was listed as a student. There's also a Thomas Patton listed, but it is uncertain if they are brothers, especially since it says they were born in different states, but it seems likely that they are at least related. But why were Thomas Patton and John Patton living with the Scott family? Who were they to each other? In researching the history of Leon County, Texas, I soon found that Thomas Scott was the first teacher to arrive in Leon County. So it definitely made sense that they would be living in this house with a teacher if they were students. But then I noticed something else. Sarah Scott was born in South Carolina. And I remembered that in the 1880 census, it listed John Hiram Patton's mother as having been born in South Carolina. So could Sarah be John's mother? And it took me turning to the Texas land grants to be able to figure.
So it froze on our end.
Oh no!
I don't know what's going on.
Huh?
Oh, it just completely froze. Well, that's weird. I'm gonna try just unplugging and replugging it. Hold on a second.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, we lost sound and everything with that too, so hold on a second.
Oh wow! All right.
And now we can hear you again. So
Okay.
that's what I was saying. And gotta bear with us on this so that because I'm literally just using a tablet to screen mirror. So I think we were about there.
It listed John Hiram Patton's mother as having been born in South Carolina. So could Sarah be John's mother? And it took me turning to the Texas land grants to be able to figure this out. First, I looked for a Sarah Scott in the Leon County records, and I found a land grant that had also listed a Thomas Patton as a chairman. So to me, that seemed to indicate there probably was more of a connection between Thomas Patton and John Patton and Sarah Scott. So taking my hunch further, I looked for Sarah Patton in the land grants and hit the jackpot. Within this document set is an 1838 clerk note, which indicates Sarah Patton was a widow by 1838 and entitled to 1,280 acres of land. Interestingly, this note isn't from Leon County, but Houston County, which is directly to the east. Sarah then turns around in 1847 to sell that land, and it is in these records that we get confirmation that Sarah Patton is truly the same person as Sarah Scott, also confirming our hunch that she is likely the mother of John Patton and Thomas Patton, and why they would have been living with her in the Scott household. I even pulled up an old land office map of Leon County and was able to find Sarah Patton listed. But if Sarah Patton is the mother, then who is the father? One interesting thing I found was that there was actually a Patton family that lived in Houston County, which begs the question, is this just coincidence or are they the same family? I ended up finding a few public trees that actually had John Hiram Patton with a father who is connected to this family in Houston County. These trees listed John Hiram Patton's father as a man named John H. Patton, who was the son of James Henry Patton and Sarah Ann Connor, who were both from Abbeville, South Carolina, but part of the family which moved to Houston County. But unfortunately, there are a few issues with this. Based on all the data I found, John H. Patton would have been born about 1810, making James Henry Patton 14 years old and Sarah 11 years old when John H. Patton was born, which is extremely unlikely. But I also couldn't find any cited records in these family trees that listed this, nor could I find anything that even said that James Henry Patton and Sarah Ann Connor even had a son named John H. Patton. So I thought,
I mean, maybe it's also that John Hiram Patton was just misdated. I mean, that happened a lot.
Yeah, it could be, but you know, we just don't have anything to tie them together yet.
Mhm.
You know, so at this point, it's like, yeah, we don't know. There's nothing there to tie it, and I don't know where the other Patton that is on the family tree that you sent to him came from.
The beginnings of the building on that is from, I just lost their name, that now live in Wisconsin, set up the beginnings on that stuff. I didn't do anything to populate that. It's kind of incorporated stuff from other places.
That was from Family Tree, what the Mormon one, right?
No, well, the stuff he's showing is Ancestry, though, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, what you all sent me, there were other trees that had the same parents for John Hiram Patton. So it wasn't just your tree that had it. It was something that someone had put on a tree at some point, and whoever built your tree or whoever compiled that tree that you'd sent me had included that.
Yeah.
So very common, especially with the genealogy stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's one of those that, as with what you were finding there, it's like, okay, we've got somebody there, but until there's a tie to it where you can actually find that person, it's like, yeah, they happen to be there, but Patton's a common name. You know, that's one of the real problems with when you're trying to track that kind of a name back.
Well, and I would just say in terms of that, so this is one that was set up by a friend as a service auction at church years ago. I don't actually have an Ancestry.com account, so I have limited ability to do anything with it.
Right. Okay. So let's keep going on the episode here.
Thought maybe I should make a timeline of John Hiram Patton's father. That way we can at least get an idea of who we are looking for. First, it seems likely he was born circa 1810 based on the age of Thomas and John, also based on the age of Sarah being born about 1811. In the 1880 census, it shows John's father was born in Alabama, so we can assume that he was likely born in Alabama since it correctly states that his mother was born in South Carolina. Based on the discharge papers from John Hiram Patton, he was actually born in Claiborne County, Mississippi in 1836, which means that his father was likely in the same area at the same time, assuming that he was around when his wife gave birth. But based on the dates, there's also a question of whether or not John Hiram Patton's father even made it all the way out to Texas. It's possible that he died before they left, and it's even possible that he might have died on the way there. So using this timeline, I took a look through a bunch of different Patton families to see if I could find even just a few good candidates based on this. But unfortunately,
one interesting thing about the Patton family is that, like, because you said that they came from Mississippi, right? Well, his father, my grandfather, actually went to Arkansas.
No, he was born in Arkansas. Moved to Marietta, Oklahoma,
in a covered wagon.
So in 1922.
Yeah, so like, still an arduous journey even as late as that, and yet, you know, they're doing this in, you know, what, the 1840s.
Yeah, and that was at the age of 4 that Dad did that.
Yeah. Well, he was saying that Hiram Patton moved when he was pretty young too.
Yeah.
Or John Hiram Patton.
John Hiram, right?
Yeah.
So, and if he's the right person for that position on the chart, you know, we don't know who populated that box on the chart and
well, we know
what information.
We know it's John Hiram. It's the next Patton back.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, for John Hiram Patton, through the 23andMe test that you took, we have confirmation through other descendants.
I came up empty.
While there were a few candidates that slightly fit into this, there were.
Now he's moving there. He's not moving here.
All right. Well, this time I'm going to switch the audio source to being that so that we can at least hear it when it freezes.
Because we can watch it up there, that's fine.
Yeah, but then I can't see.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, and that's really too far away to be able to read the genealogy stuff.
But I can full screen it.
That would help.
But the problem is then I can't see the chat.
Right.
Actually, I can barely see the chat anyways. Well, you know what I'll do? I'll move this over here. And this over here.
Yeah.
And let me change the audio source.
I hope everyone who is watching all of this is enjoying the technology.
This is a problem with trying to get as wide a screen as possible. Just making sure I'm switching audio speakers. Good. So then we can at least if it freezes, it'll only freeze here.
Okay.
Were a lot of issues in different areas.
Full screen, thank you.
But the quest isn't over because we have Y-DNA. I've teamed up with Family Tree DNA who have sent Cypher a big Y700 kit so that we can test his Y lineage and see if we can solve this patent mystery. And maybe we can even try some of the new technology that I recently discussed in my Future of Genealogy video, which you can watch right here. And thank you to my Patreon patrons.
Patrons. We're always grateful for our patrons. Let me move this back over here. So, wrong one.
Sorry, I'm getting attacked by dogs right now. My dogs just came back from a walk.
Yeah. Our cat's not really capable of that these days.
Not Riley.
Well, apparently King is currently attacking my house sitter,
That's right, yes.
shoving his face all over it. But King is quite a bit younger than Riley.
Yes.
So it's an interesting conundrum that you're running into there.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the Y-DNA, because with Y-DNA, we're looking at the Y chromosome, which is passed from father to son, almost unchanged every generation, and allows us to look back and solve mysteries like this that are farther back in time than regular DNA testing, autosomal DNA testing like 23andMe or Ancestry, than what that gives. So I've got the results pulled up, so I'll show that on screen in a second. But I guess before I do that, if you do have any questions.
Well, before you show them, I'm just curious, is the Y-DNA any more trustworthy than the 23andMe?
Not really. I mean, they're both just as trustworthy. There's different techniques and ways of interpreting them. Because with the 23andMe type of tests or Ancestry tests, we're looking at DNA that really only lets us look back. We like to say about 300 to 500 years. We say that because it's really more about generations. So basically the idea of once you get back to fourth, fifth, sixth great grandparents, you have ancestors where they're your ancestors, but you may share zero DNA, inherited no DNA from them because it was filtered out through recombination. Whereas with Y-DNA, we're only looking at one specific line as opposed to the entire family tree, but it allows us to look confidently back tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. So they're both, we can be confident in both, but in different ways and used in different ways. So like in this case, 23andMe could possibly be helpful, but because John Hiram Patton is such a distant ancestor, even if we find people that might match to some Patton line, at that distance, we'd have the worry of maybe they're just a cousin in another way, because they'd share such little DNA with you. And so when you have small amounts of DNA, the estimation of relationship could range greatly. So you could have a cousin that's a fourth cousin that shares the same amount of DNA as an eighth cousin of yours, just because of the randomness of recombination.
Okay.
We have a cat finally coming around, who
Must have
is
heard
very
my dogs.
confused by the current setup. But he's going onto his little bag there.
Or not.
Or and maybe he's going back to a safe place back in the computer room.
He'll do whatever he wants.
Yeah. He's an old cat. He's 14 years old.
Yep.
And the big one. But why is it that, just to explain to the viewers, why is it that Y allows for such a specific line and so far back?
So it just has to do with the inheritance of DNA. So when you have your DNA inherited from your parents, you get different types of DNA from your mom and your dad. And so for males, they have an X chromosome from their mother and a Y chromosome from their father. And this Y chromosome is only passed from father to son. So if a man has a daughter, she's not going to have a Y chromosome. She'll have an X chromosome from her father, X chromosome from her mother. But with that Y chromosome coming from the father, we know that specific line because it's going to be the father's father and his father and his father and so on. But on top of that, it mutates at a rate that we can then use when we compare people to figure out how distant they are. So when we look at the Y chromosomes of two people, we see how much they share in common and how much they don't. And so when we see how much they are sharing, we can then get an idea of their distance. And the less that someone is sharing with you, the further distance you have. So I don't know the exact rate of mutation, but my understanding is it's about every 5 births. So basically for every 5 sons born, there's one that may have a mutation on their Y chromosome from what their father has.
Yeah, and there's also, I have to point out that there are people who, of course, there are women who are born with Y chromosomes, they'll have like XXY, and then there are some men who are born with multiple Y chromosomes where it'll be like XYY. And, and it does kind of bring into question a lot of the genetic profile that you can build up when those kinds of exceptions are possible. And it's actually not that rare of a condition. It's something like 5% of the population has an abnormal XY combination.
Yes, I mean there's a lot of things that we have to take into account when having people do DNA testing. Any sort of chromosomal difference like that, definitely. Another thing to consider is anyone that has chimerism for any reason. So having multiple DNA profiles, a great example is anyone that ever has a bone marrow transplant. I believe a lot of terms of services for DNA companies say that they can't do that because the profile that comes out may be the donor's profile and not the actual person who's testing. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of there's a lot of variations of things to consider when it comes to these DNA tests. So especially when people know that they have something that may skew the results than kind of the base results that they give. Yeah.
So let's talk results then.
All right. So let me just make sure it's logged in because the site does one of those auto logouts, and it did.
Oh, are you going to share the screen?
Yeah, I just want to log in first.
Yeah. Let me know if I have to end my screen share in order for you to do yours.
Okay, we will find out in just 1 second.
And we got somebody from Vegas.
Yeah, that's what I was looking.
What was that? Chico. Oh, he's actually met you a few times.
Oh,
What are you doing?
honey.
He's just clawing his bag.
What? No.
He's trying to get our attention, as cats do.
That's right.
I mean, if you want to pick him up.
I kind of think that's
Okay. Is my screen being shared? I don't know if you need to add it to the stage.
Oh, I have to add it. There we go.
All right, perfect. So we've got.
So it's very difficult for us to see, so we have to lean like. Oh wait, I can bring it over here.
Okay.
And it's still going, so I can actually see it.
Okay,
It's still
so I'm going to be limited, obviously, in what I show because certain pages will show matches names, and we do not want to show any matches names for privacy's sake. So I'm going to be limited to certain things where it doesn't show that. So this is what is known as your time tree, and this is literally just a family tree, a patrilineal family tree that you're fitting into through that Y chromosome. Okay, so this is your line. This is what we would call your terminal SNP. A SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's just a fancy word for a specific place on the genome where if there's a variation, then that is indicative of a specific relationship. And so with Y chromosomes, you and this other matcher, this other DNA match, you both come from this RFTD5290. But here's where it's really unfortunate is this ancestor of yours lived sometime, average about 981 CE is what they say, but you can see the way the range goes. So it's, about 1,000-year range. So your shared ancestor with this person could be as far back as 400 CE, or it could be as recent as about, it looks maybe 1400 or so. So it's a big range. And unfortunately, this is not going to tell us anything in terms of the patent line, because this is probably before the patent surname even came around for the family. But what we do know is that
the patent surname is in the Doomsday Book, although it's spelled Patten.
Yeah. But in terms of, like a lot of families obviously adopting surnames in the British Isles in the 1200s. And so this is dating within that range. But basically the thing that we would hope for is to find a patent ancestor, probably, 1400s or later, where we can tie them to a specific family. But that's also assuming we are looking for a patent family. One thing I don't think I mentioned in the video, but is a possibility as a hypothesis, was if Sarah Scott, was she possibly born Sarah Patton and the patent name is through her and she didn't know who the husband was? But that we don't know. It's just another hypothesis of what it could be. So the thing we would often look for here, if we had a lot of closer matches, is just to see the commonalities of surnames. Do we see a common surname popping up? But because you have so few matches within that time frame, we don't see any common surnames within your trees with any of these matches. And then this closest match of yours is not a patent.
Yeah, and that's also, 1,000 years ago. So
yeah, exactly. So unfortunately here, we still have more steps to go. So we're not out of luck, but the steps that I would want to take are a couple. And that's what I've been working on. One is to find a patent descendant of John Hiram Patton through one of the other lines. So you descend from one of John Hiram Patton's sons. He had other sons. Could we find a Y DNA descendant of those that would be able to test? If not, the next generation, basically the furthest up that we can get to test, because that will give us more information on the DNA test in terms of the terminal SNPs. The other thing we would look for is to try to find patents from those two patent families that we have hypothesized. So the patent family connected through what was originally supplied, and then patent family of that other patent family in Houston County. If we can get a patent descendant of both those families to test, we can then at least see, are any of them matching up? So we don't have anyone on this match list here, but we can still take steps to try to figure it out. So that's where we are with this, but I thought I would show a couple of other things that you would find interesting.
Riley,
actually, I guess questions at this point. I should ask if you have any questions at this point before I move on.
All do you guys?
No. Now, had
Okay.
you added in anything from the genealogy that had been done back in Oklahoma?
No,
And the one that you sent to him?
I don't think so.
Okay. Because we should probably look at that as well.
Yeah, so there's another genealogy that was done by someone else in Oklahoma that's a
part of
cousin.
Okay.
And there may be more in that.
Look up there. You
Yeah.
look up there. That's
Yeah.
where the camera is.
Oh, well, I'm looking at your mother at the moment. So, but yeah, there may be other directions to go, and
Yeah.
other family charting that just because part of the thing with the this part of the family is that the only part of the family here of our family that's out here in the West is basically us. The rest of the family is still in the Midwest, in the South. And if there was more information there, it would be in that genealogy. So there may be other routes to go, other names to track that would be in that genealogy.
Yeah, definitely send that along, because it's at this point so open. There's any families that might have a connection we wouldn't want to look into to rule out.
Yeah, because I know that Colleen has tracked the Stinnets and the Coffees and these family lines, tracked them
Through Family Search
Yeah.
way back.
yeah, back to Jamestown and that. So, those can be taken back quite early.
Stinnets are the ones that went from Texas all the way to like Tennessee or something like that.
From Arkansas. Was
Oh.
it Arkansas?
I don't remember.
The ones that went up to Missouri and joined.
But we're
the
Southerners
Iowa.
who joined
Oh,
joined the
yes,
Union.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the Stinnets.
Yeah. And they had to make a pretty arduous journey. But that side of the family can actually go pretty far back.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the one that goes the farthest back is the Coffees.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
No,
oh, that's the one that goes all the way back to Jamestown, right?
Right.
well, actually goes all the way back to Northern Ireland.
Yep.
Before Jamestown.
Yeah. But and so who knows? There may be another route to take that would bypass this particular
Yeah, but that's very specifically the patent line.
right.
Yeah.
And this also happens. You can also just run into a break in the line.
Mhm.
That happens. The records are not the best in the world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And especially when you're dealing with those common names.
Yep.
So,
I've dealt with a lot of archives in institutions that I've run over the years, and I've worked with a lot of genealogists over the years, and had them come in and they're sure they're going to find the mystical record that they need, and sometimes it's just not there. I wish you luck, but it's not everybody saved everything, and it may have gotten burned up. It may have been in the midst of a county seat war. It may have, who knows? There's a lot of reasons things didn't survive.
It wasn't a county seat war in anywhere that you don't, like in South Dakota, was there?
There were, but not in ones that I was involved with. But
Okay.
I'm just saying there's a lot of different reasons that records didn't survive.
I hear county seat war and I go, ooh, that's something I know.
So do I. And it could just be, it could be just like San Luis Obispo, where the judge wanted
Just
shelves
yeah.
empty, out of his office, and he
Literally had to save records out of a trash can.
yeah.
Oh wow.
They got saved by the county museum because the guy that was told to take him to the dump said, no, I'm taking him down to the museum. And they were hidden for a good 30 years because there was worries that they were going to have to throw them away. So there's a lot of reasons that things can get lost.
Yeah, and also museums sometimes are not well managed.
Yes. Counties are not well managed. Records are not well managed. Museums.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's all kinds of issues that can come along with
Yes.
where those records get lost. There's also just there's official embargoing and unofficial.
Yeah.
Where the county workers just don't feel like working with out of towners.
Mhm.
And the recent the current vice president, but recent presidential nominee, I had to deal with on that, and I specifically told her to go away.
That's right. Yep.
But and so I mean, I was part of that whole soft embargo thing.
Yeah.
Although it was more that the institution she was working with was refusing to do the work they were supposed to be doing, and I'm not doing it for them.
That's right. And there's plenty of records out there that are down in the basement in that storage room, and if you want to paw through them, you go ahead. But there's no way of getting at them unless you're willing to go through the mouse poop and the dust. And
there's one article called just the amount of times you end up getting sick from pawing through old records and that.
Yes.
Called that Derrida dust.
Interesting.
I've dealt with that.
Referring to the French postmodernist, but how that can kind of destroy any attempt at getting through records and that and a proper understanding of history. So it's the dust that Derrida left. Yep. So with this Y-DNA, is there anything further with it?
There's a few more things I do want to show you.
Okay,
so I have this pulled up, and this is
here so that we can see it.
Yeah, let me know once you can see it.
Yeah, I have to hit F11.
Yeah, for everyone on in chat, hopefully they can see it too. This is what's known as the Globe Trekker. And so this is showing the Y line tracing from what we call Y chromosomal Adam. So the oldest human male that we can trace this Y chromosome lineage to, and it will show that line tracing throughout time. So you'll see the timeline down here where you'll see it going through. So we're going to start it here. And so you can just see it following along.
So when, well, here, pause it real quick.
Yep.
Okay, so, I mean, when we're talking, it's showing, basically where humans began.
Correct.
This is literally, 40,000 years ago that it's talking about.
So we're starting right here. We're starting 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that even Homo sapien at that point?
Yes.
So this is who we call Y chromosomal Adam. He is the ancestor from whom every human on Earth we've been able to trace the Y chromosome to this man. We don't know who he was. He wasn't the only man alive at the time. But
eventually he just took over the gene pool.
His Y chromosome's the only one that's alive. But every so often there's a new line that's found. So it actually went back. I forgot how long ago. It was maybe in the past 10 years. They found someone who tested in the southeast of the U.S. who they ended up finding, he has a lineage that's completely separate from everyone else's and took Y chromosomal Adam back further. So you can see below the estimated time about where that person is.
We can't actually see it. It's too tiny.
Oh, it's too tiny.
Yeah.
Well, what you can't see below that's the time period. But if you follow along down here, it kind of gives a generalized.
So, that's kind of cool that it shows the ice sheets coming down.
Yeah. So this is one of their newest tools that they put on the big Y. So if anyone's done Y DNA testing with family tree DNA but didn't do big Y, they did one of the STR tests, they won't get this.
So now it's showing pretty much all in Britain.
Yeah, at
And
this point, basically we know
that's Ireland or Great Britain.
Yeah, we know that they were in the British Isles, you know, probably within the past, 2,000 years at least. And so once we get to that, that's where it starts getting to the point of kind of redundancy. You just see them kind of floating all over the place. But basically they're tracing this by using your matches.
Yeah.
In a sense. So
like 2,000 years ago though.
Yeah.
So that's before William the Conqueror.
By 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like there was a massive population transfer because of William the Conqueror and basically French takeover of Britain.
So I have one more thing to show for the Y chromosome. And so this is the ancient connections. So this is where they're showing your comparison to well-known archaeological sites, the DNA that was tested from human remains found there. And so this is the closest relative of yours, I believe, through that Y chromosome. And so you and Gravelly Guy share an ancestor who lived about 2300 BCE. But we have this entire listing up here. I don't know if any kind of pique your interest that you would want to look at, but I know Denisova 8, that's one that people like to look at. And so it's tracing that back to basically way far back.
Yeah, we can't actually see the options because it's so tiny. I mean, like.
Oh, I wonder. Let me see if I can make it.
Even if I hold it up to my face, I can't read it.
Yep.
Does that help at all?
I suppose. Yeah, I can now read it. Hold on. So, I don't actually recognize basically any. I mean, you're probably the one who would recognize any of these. That top badge there.
Well, there's an interesting badge. I mean, here's one. Thames.
Don't click it though.
I'm not touching.
So what's the name?
10. So that would assumably be somewhere.
This one right here.
Mm-hmm.
And
so 2400 BC, not directly related. I can't.
Yeah.
share a common paternal land. Lived between 382 and 197 BCE in the region now known as Tam, Oxfordshire, England. Yeah. So there's an example of southern England that's, what are we looking at? 2,200 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before Caesar ever I mean, Strabo hadn't even gotten there yet.
Right. Well, I mean, that and that was the other piece in terms of that, on how much of that might have been Roman invasion, but that's telling you that it's not.
Yeah, it's pre-Roman, like that's Celtic. And you know, it earliest is 200 BC, and Strabo gets there in what, 160?
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know which side of well, I do know it's my side, so different on that.
Would be on the Y, yeah.
No,
that was Doggerland, which is what we were trying to come up
that's
with
what
earlier.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because
Found DNA from Doggerland?
Yeah, Abby and I share my cousin Abby and I have similar stuff on that on Doggerland.
I didn't even know we've been able to pull DNA from Doggerland.
Well,
it's been kind of underwater for a while.
Kind of the whole generic area.
Yeah. I mean, it was connected by land for a while. I mean,
Yeah, but we're talking 10,000 years ago.
Mini Minutemen has a, and oh, I'm forgetting her name. They did a combination thing on Doggerland. I'm forgetting what her name is.
Anyways,
But yeah, either way, they did something on
Mhm.
Doggerland.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. But yeah, not surprising because when it comes to that old of DNA, it's like you end up basically being related to everyone.
Yeah.
that's
So that's, I mean, that's really it for the Y DNA. The only other thing to really mention with it is that when I looked at the matches in terms of confirmed ancestors for even distant Y matches that went back far, it was just a slew of areas across the British Isles: Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, England, Wales, Cornwall, name it all. It's, you had matches everywhere. And of course, every single English speaking country across the world. I remember there was one branch I saw where it was a bunch of South Africans who didn't really know their pre-South Africa origins, but obviously some sort of an English. So still a lot of work to do to solve that patent line.
Yeah, because I saw a few people who came in early. For instance, I saw Matthew Housley, who's a regular on Twitch, was asking, so what's the patent? What's the came in late? What's the correct? And this whole thing has basically been saying,
pretty much, yeah.
It's been an old patent story that that we were somehow related. I saw some people in the chat talking about like, well, they're Southerners, and the patent, the George S. Patton was a Southerner. It's like, yeah, that was the assumption, and
but it was always assumed to be distant.
Yeah,
it was never assumed to be close.
Yeah,
never assumed to be. The tale was that George S.'s grandfather was like our great grandfather's brother.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So it's, one of these is really distant, but somehow
the way I understood it was
cousins
that,
or third cousins or fourth cousins or whatever.
The way that I understood it was that General Patton's great grandfather was of direct relation.
No, that's
how I understood it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's incorrect.
Yeah.
We just said that.
Yeah, and my comment was always, but I don't count him because Dad was in the Navy. And my father, your grandfather was underwater demolition in World War II. So forget that. Now your grandmother, of course, was an Army nurse. So okay,
it's like, hold on.
And I always gave her credit for that.
But, and she was an officer.
Oh yeah, but she was only in for a couple of years. He did his 20.
Yeah.
But anyways, no,
I always reason to stop doing that.
Yeah, that was long afterwards. She got out in 46. They didn't meet until 48. No, it was always a joke that I made about George S.
Yeah, because the other thing was, the assumption was, because if it was a direct relation to the great grandfather of George S., that would mean that we'd have a direct line to slave owners, and it would make sense of why they were, fighting for the Confederacy. Because the first General Patton wasn't actually George S. Patton Jr. It was George S. Patton during the Civil War, although he was awarded it posthumously. Well, technically not. He was awarded it 2 days before his death. He just didn't know it.
That's right.
But but he died fighting for the Confederacy. And indeed, that whole line would, if we were connected, did own slaves, but we don't know if we're actually connected. So maybe not. But in either case, it's I do get a lot of comments on my Lost Cause video where it's like, you're not a Southerner, you don't get to say anything about that. It's like, funny story.
Oh yeah,
It's
you're
like-
descended from Southerners.
We've got plenty of Southerners in the background. I've got plenty of Northerners too.
Mhm.
My mom's side, and
Oh, yeah.
we're about to find out about all
That's
that,
right.
too.
That's right. Yeah.
So before we get started, and also while I'm getting the video set up, do you want to introduce the second video in any way?
Yeah, so this second video is looking into the Gaffey line of the family. Technically, we're looking at both the Gaffey and Kemet families. And these are two Irish families that basically I was thinking it's kind of like true crime meets genealogy. So we're going to look at a very interesting story in the family history. And I dove really deep into trying to tell the full story in as much depth as possible, which took a long time of meticulously going over all sorts of records just to make sure every little detail matched up with what was said, especially being that, and I mentioned this in the video, me contacting multiple court clerks, archives, historical societies, genealogical societies, librarians and archivists throughout Wisconsin. Nobody knew where 19th century criminal court cases were related to this. So I had to use a lot of records outside of the court records. But I think I figured out the story. So it's going to be a true crime meets genealogy. That's really the best way to say it.
But you were able to find the newspapers.
Oh, yeah. I was able to find the newspapers and a little bit of other tangential stuff that helped in figuring it out.
All right. Well,
So.
Let's get that thing. No, I want this one. There we go. And here we go.
May 13th, 1876, Janesville, Wisconsin. James, a 21-year-old farmer, and Ellen, who had turned 18 years old just 12 days prior, are getting married. While not everyone in the family approves of this marriage, this couple is in love and they don't care what the family thinks. Less than 2 weeks later, Ellen would be in the hospital with severe injuries, Ellen's father would be dead, and her new husband, James, was on trial for murder. Hello, everybody. I am Jared Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and on today's video, we will be discussing the trial of James Henry Gaffey, the second great-grandfather to Dr. Joseph Hall-Patton, the Cynical Historian. On the last episode about Joseph's family, we had traced his patrilineal line to Leon County, Texas. On today's episode, we'll be looking at his maternal grandmother's side, the Gaffey family. Joseph's maternal grandmother, Jane Ellen Gaffey, was born in Iowa on July.
I just have to point out, look at the pictures he chose.
Yeah.
I went all yearbook photos. I had to, because that's your grandmother's yearbook photo.
That's my mother's yearbook photo, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And you
There's-
don't have one for my
there's no
father?
beard.
I couldn't
Well,
find it.
that's
I was
what-
looking and looking and looking, and I just couldn't.
Yeah,
There weren't
no.
many yearbooks. Yeah.
As far as I can tell, I have gone back trying to look at online available stuff. He doesn't show up in any, so I now really question whether he actually graduated high school at all. Even though at one point, and I didn't save it because it didn't have him in it, I had what was theoretically his yearbook, but he wasn't in that. And so I've gone through everything else around it, give or take 4 or 5. He doesn't show up in anything. Like if he dropped out of high school, he must have dropped out as a 15 or 16-year-old.
So before he was running a hardware store, what was he doing before that?
Well, I'm talking as a 15-year-old. Then he went into 3Cs.
Yeah, but
And from there he went into
so he went straight from high school to the civilian conservation corps.
well,
Well,
it's hard to
no,
know.
he went. Well, he went and worked.
He worked
the
in a
beekeeper.
beekeeper up in Minnesota.
Yeah,
We know he rode the Royals to California at some point.
yeah, just like Dad did.
But he went back.
Well,
we
so
know in the
Bill
19
did and Dad did.
yeah. So
They didn't go together.
We know in the 1940 census he's listed as being unemployed. And that he went into, and later on, and so that would have been in the spring of 40. Later on in 40, he went into that 1 year training program at Fort Snelling.
Yeah, the Army Air Corps.
Came out of that, did his 1 year service and came out of that in November of 1941. Bad timing. And went back in February of 42.
He said went back to the same desk, the same typewriter.
Yeah, that's what he always said. And
because he always said that he fought a typewriter during the war.
Yeah, he was Army Air Corps and served in 8th Air Force in England during World War II. And came back from that and worked in a hardware store in Sioux City.
And eventually bought his own
hardware store in Akron, Iowa. Yeah, where I was born.
Yep.
So I actually just added something. If you want to pull up real quick, here we have his World War II service compensation file.
Yeah.
So
which is here in the house somewhere.
Yeah.
One thing that's actually a good point to point out right now is very recently a group called Reclaim the Records successfully won a case against the VA. And now people can go to the Reclaim the Records website to get what are known as C files. So these are files for any deceased military members where their family were submitting for any sort of VA compensation, any sort of even like the headstone once they pass. But not only does Reclaim the Records have the site set up where you can search through an index, they have it on the site where you can then send an automatic FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, and actually get these C files.
Nice.
So this would be something wonderful to pull up here, but that's something that just happened within the past week. Reclaim the Records just announced it. The website is up and live. So if you have anyone watching, if you have family members who served in the military and they were getting any sort of VA benefits, go and look through the Reclaim the Records new database. So
fascinating.
Yeah, I had not heard of that. That's very good.
Let me unfull screen this so that I can. This is the problem with trying to do this on the couch.
Here, I'm going to close that out for you.
Makes it a little easier. Add to stage. There we go. I still can't get over.
I love that photo, don't you?
4 years before I started growing my beard.
No, that's not your senior picture.
Yeah, isn't it?
No, it's not my senior. It's not my senior picture either.
Did you get these pictures from the same yearbook?
I had multiple yearbooks for both of you.
Yeah,
I thought that was the 72 yearbook.
I don't think so.
I thought that was.
I don't think so. I don't.
That's not yours. That's not your.
No, that's not
72. I mean, that could be 71. But
yeah, that's.
So probably your junior year and her.
Yeah.
We could go pull a yearbook.
Yeah, we could pull the yearbook.
I'm looking right now for you.
Yeah, but that's like I say, that could be 5 years before I started growing the beard.
Yeah.
But I started growing the beard in 76, and it's never been off since then. That's why it looks so weird.
If you guys do choose to get up and grab something, be sure to grab Grandpa Bill's picture from the Wall of Shame.
Oh, do you want me to go do that?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, if you go
Not a problem.
grab that real quick, because we do have it here. Just have to go and grab it real quick. Mom's going upstairs. We have a wall with all the pictures on it, and
not all of them, but we've got the Wall of Shame.
And we call it the Wall of Shame.
Yeah, when you sent that to me at first, I was like, wait a second.
Apparently, I thought that was actually kind of like just a tradition that most families do. Apparently, that's just us.
Yeah.
I just never heard of it being called a Wall of Shame.
So that's about 1974.
So actually, so this is the photo that I have Oh wow.
Probably. Oop, there we go. That's Grandpa Bill, right next to Grandma Jane.
Very cool. So the photo that I have of you, Mark, is actually from your University of California, Irvine, 1976 yearbook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's taken, or that's 2 months before I started growing the beard. So
Wow.
that's actually June of 76. And this was started August 10th, 1976.
Can you pull it up?
Oh, yeah. Here. I was about to
Let's
start
see
pulling up the one for your mom.
That's why the hair is so long in that picture.
All right. There we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
that one. That's from 76. That's why I know it. Yeah.
And let me bring this over here so that we can better see it.
Yeah. That's from the UCI yearbook.
I didn't even know there was a UCI.
I never got one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
Fun.
Yeah, so and I can show you we have quite a few photos. So and then we actually have, I think this is the one where both of you are in it.
Right.
And this is Saddleback.
Yeah.
This is high school.
This is 1972.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was showing a picture earlier of, like, I think it was a choir picture, and you were wearing the same shirt.
Right.
And he was saying, like, your mom looks like she was grunge in the 70s.
And we were just friends at that point. We never dated in high
There-
school.
there is a classic picture. Again, it would be in this yearbook at a theater party, and I'm standing eating ice cream in the same T-shirt with a macrame belt, bell bottoms, macrame choker, and what is missing is my Peter Max tennis shoes. You can't tell.
And then
It's
it's
just-
like about as 70s as you can get. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's just classic.
Might as well have a
70s.
flower in your hair at that point.
So yeah, I don't know if these are large enough to see. Because this is the photo that Joe was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Colleen really liked the frowny face T-shirt. She was known for that.
What's funny on that is the combination of this with your happy face one with the gunshot through the.
No, the drop of blood on it. Yours. The
Oh,
Watchman one.
the Watchman. Yeah.
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 I always wear that. Yeah. That's still, the pin is still connected to my backpack.
Yeah.
I wore a happy face, a Watchman happy face pin throughout Afghanistan, and I've kept it connected to my backpack ever since.
Yeah.
So I thought this was interesting. I'm sure it's not uncommon, but I had to go through and make sure that I wasn't confusing you with the Colleen Hall that had gone to Santa Ana High School in the 20s, because I always search by Santa Ana. And so at first I was like, wait, 1920s? What's going on here?
Yeah, Saddleback didn't even exist in the 1920s.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Well,
and then
especially
interesting
after
as well.
59.
Oh, you guys were pretty.
Yeah.
You guys were
Yeah,
going to
I
a
was
pretty
part
new
of the
school.
first homecoming committee.
Mhm.
There were some people who had built family trees for your family that had actually photos of another Colleen Hall who'd gone to school in like Iowa or something. And so they had this other Colleen Hall for their photos
Well,
for
she
you.
went to school in Iowa.
Yep. Colleen was born in Iowa,
Yeah.
but moved out to California at the age of 9. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of any pictures from that other than school pictures. But I mean,
Yeah.
if it's from Akron, it would be me.
Mhm.
Yeah. So like, but that does impose a bit of a weird thing when you're looking at like high school pictures, because she went to middle school and high school in California, but is born
I'm part
in
of
corn
grammar school.
country,
One part, right,
and also went to a Catholic school. in
In
Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit. I don't know if you'd be able to find any records from that.
Yeah, I don't think I did. The other Colleen was definitely not you. Definitely not you.
Well, it's from the 20s. Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
little bit before our time. So let's continue on with the with where we are. I'm just going to keep this one on this tab just so that we can
Okay. Yeah.
see the chat a bit.
Mhm.
July 1st, 1929, born to Frank George Gaffey and Margaret Elizabeth Enright. Jane's father, Frank Gaffey, had been born in 1888 in Fonda, Iowa, and grew up on a farm, continuing farm work as his profession for most of his life. But in the 1930s, he started jumping around to other various jobs, including work as a track laborer for the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad and working at a Nutrina Mills pet food factory. Frank and Margaret married on May 2nd, 1916, spending the first few years of their marriage moving around and living in various towns in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. But by February 1921, Frank and Margaret had moved back to Iowa where they would raise their family. Their first child, Florence Alicia Gaffey, was born in April 1921, followed by their second child, Glenn Francis Gaffey, born 2 years later in March 1923, and then their third child, Robert Francis Gaffey, just a year.
Where does Bud come from? Where does the name Bud come from?
My mother evidently couldn't pronounce Glenn or whatever, and so he was her butter and Bud and it
just
and
ended
it
up
got used
becoming.
on that, but it's only ever been used in the family.
Mhm.
Like my his wife, my Aunt Betty, always called him Glenn.
Yep.
Every place else he was known as Glenn.
Yeah, I didn't know that he was
He was
Glenn.
Glenn. Oh, yeah.
I only knew him as Uncle Bud.
Yeah.
And I met Florence. In fact,
No.
that wasn't the
No,
Aunt
she
Florence. That
No.
Oh, okay.
That was Frank's sister.
Oh, Frank's sister was the Florence that I bought the postcards from.
Yeah.
Or I bought the two postcards that
Yeah.
she had written.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I bought a couple of postcards
Yeah, no.
in an antique
Florence
shop.
died in 1938.
Oh, okay.
Remember,
Oh,
she's-
that's that Florence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
The
you've
quilt
got
maker.
the quilt maker, right? Yeah. But I ended
Lots
up,
of memories coming back.
yeah. No, I ended up buying a couple of postcards in an antique show that were written by Florence Gaffey in 1918. And because they came from one of the towns that Colleen's family were from, and Colleen looked at them and said, I know who wrote these, and called her
Great aunt.
great aunt Florence, and great aunt Florence said, "Oh, I remember writing those." And it was telling her about all that went on that summer. It was like, okay, why not? Anyways, let's keep going.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, I was
awkward
just going
doing-
to saying this. Robert Francis only lived a week. He was a preemie, and preemies just didn't survive.
No,
In the
no,
20s, yeah, there was no such thing as incubators at that point.
Yeah.
No.
Year and a half later in 1924. Robert Francis Gaffey was unfortunately born premature and died at just 1 week of age.
Oh.
Based on later family obituaries, it seems that there was another boy who had been born to the couple and had died prematurely, but I couldn't find any record on them.
No,
Joseph's grandmother, Jane.
Yeah. I managed to find somewhere in, I think it's my grandfather's obituary, that is in a scrapbook, that child was named Stephen. I don't know much else other than that, other than my cousin tracked down where he was born. He does not have a headstone, although
Where he was born or where he was buried?
where he's buried.
Yeah, okay. You said both.
Was it in Iowa? Do you know? Do you remember?
Yes, it's in this. It's in the Catholic cemetery in Sioux City. It's in the same cemetery where Glenn Francis Gaffey is buried.
Yeah. So I know
And-
Robert Francis Gaffey's also buried there.
Okay, so it's there. Yeah, I haven't been able to see his tombstone when we went looking for it, and it wasn't in the records. But when they did the records, we found in another place that was potentially potentially before Florence, I think, that the other child was born based on the age of the other gravestones around that
Okay.
around that spot.
I just want to point out, Northern Tommy says, "I feel like I'm intruding on a family thing."
Anyway, we should probably let it run.
We're very used to being in public now because somebody had to go and ruin privacy.
Well, if it hadn't been for them, it would have been him. It would have been you.
I mean, I was 4 years late to that. I didn't even use my real name until the Patton episode was the first time I used my real name, and that was only for the last name. I just put on my name tape, and then on the 100,000th
That's right.
100,000th subscriber episode was. Which, funny enough, by the way, my 100,000th subscriber is a rather famous channel now, CoffeeZilla.
Oh, really? Wow.
He was literally my 100,000th.
Very good.
But the special was where I did like an autobiography. Very enlightening, having to write your own biography.
It is indeed.
Well, I remember when I was researching the family, I obviously went to the Library of Congress website, and of course, who pops up but you giving an interview as part of the veteran.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone knows about that, but if you go to the Library of Congress, there's a video of Dr. Joseph Hall-Patton talking about his experiences.
Yeah, so I was doing that as part of that's part of the Veterans History Project, and I was actually doing some of the interviews, so a way of just like getting to know what it takes to do an interview is just to have yourself interviewed. So the person who was teaching me how to do oral history was the one doing that, and so it was so that I could do oral history as well. Though there was a part where it was like at the end, and it's like, hold on, I didn't talk about this one fight that we got in, and I had to turn it back on. It's like, I want this on the record. So if you go to the thing on there, you will find that there's a cut at the end, and then like a cut in of the last part where I suddenly get very serious and very angry with the army. But let's get back into this. The Battle of Ganjigal, if anybody wants to look that up.
Was born in 1929 and was the couple's last child. Jane's older sister Florence had been diagnosed with chronic bilateral bronchiectasis, a disease which causes issues with the lungs and makes breathing difficult. In 1939, Florence contracted pneumonia and it would prove deadly, with Florence passing away December 19th, 1939 at just 18 years old. Jane was only 10 years old when she lost her older sister Frances, but just about 8 years later, she would also lose her father, Frank. On June 21st, 1948, Frank would be hospitalized due to heart issues. He then suffered a stroke on July 1st, causing bulbar paralysis, and died just 2 days later. Frank's death certificate noted severe hypertension, and I thought it was really interesting that they also listed his last blood pressure reading of 242 over 120. Frank's parents were James Henry Gaffey and Ellen Jane Kemet. James was born in 1855 in Newport, Rhode Island, and his childhood would be marked by constant change. James's parents were Thomas Gaffey and Bridget Gork, immigrants from Ireland who met in Rhode Island after migrating separately sometime in the 1840s. The couple had James and his older brother Michael while in Rhode Island, but they then moved the family to Walworth County, Wisconsin by 1857. Thomas and Bridget had 2 more children in Wisconsin, but a few years after the Civil War broke out in 1863, Thomas enlisted in the Wisconsin 2nd Cavalry. Thomas served for 2 years, mustering out on Christmas Day, 1865. Thomas's wife Bridget died sometime in the 1860s, but I couldn't find any records.
Here's an interesting thing about mustering out on that particular day. If he mustered out on any time in December, within a week of
New Year's?
Christmas.
Christmas.
2 days before New Year's is when this time frame ceases to be, but it means that he was likely in DC for the Grand Review, and then they all bivouacked there for I think 4 months, and then started this gradual mustering out. But they all got counted as being the second to last week of the year. Which is like just 2 days prior to New Year's or something like that, because weeks. But like, so that means that he was likely in DC for the Grand Review.
So according to the records I found, they said he mustered out in Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay. So he probably
December 25th, Austin, Texas. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but those were from later records of, pensions and stuff like that. So it's possible that it could have been wrong.
No, I mean, that would be a perfectly normal place to muster out. There were 750,000 people in the Union Army, so like they're going all over the place. The Grand Review only had like 150,000,
something like that. Yeah, but they had troops down in Texas at that point.
Yeah. Well, Texas was where the last fighting happened.
That's right.
Well, and that's where the Stinnett mustered out, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Wonder if they were near each other.
Yeah, it's an Iowa group.
Yeah.
It's the Iowa Volunteers down there, so might very well have been. There's something to check.
That'd be real weird.
Actually specifying a year or even some correlating record just to get a better idea of where in the 1860s. Thomas would get married in the late 1860s to a Norwegian widow named Terina, who had 7 children, more than doubling the size of the family. Thomas and Terina would have a son together named George Gaffey in 1869, making a total of 12 children between both of them. By the 1870s, the family was living on a large piece of land in a rural area called Richmond, Wisconsin, which we can see mapped on this 1873 land ownership map of Richmond, Wisconsin. By overlaying the map with Google Maps, you can actually see the current day location of where the family lived. Ellen Jane Kemet was born in 1858 in Janesville, Wisconsin, to Thomas Kemet and Mary Conroy. 1858 in Janesville, Wisconsin, to Thomas Kemet and Mary Conroy, who were Irish immigrants. Ellen was their second oldest child, but oldest daughter. It's unknown when or even how James and Ellen ended up meeting, especially considering that where James lived, Richmond, Wisconsin, was about 10 miles east of where Ellen lived in Janesville, Wisconsin. But I noticed in the 1873 land ownership map of Richmond that Thomas Gaffey's land was about a mile south of land owned by another Kemet family member. So it's possible that this is how James and Ellen met. By the summer of 1876, James and his older brother Michael Gaffey had moved to Janesville, Wisconsin, and were working as carpenters. James and Ellen were also a couple at that point, but for some reason, Ellen's parents did not approve of them being together. Ellen's father, Thomas Kemet, had been especially vocal about this and had even confronted James both in public and at his home. On May 13th, 1876, James and Ellen married each other. James was only 21 years old, and Ellen had just turned 18 a week and a half prior on May 1st. Ellen's parents weren't told about the marriage, and they only found out about it 4 days later on May 17th. Ellen's parents also learned that she was staying at the house of James's brother, Michael Gaffey, so they jumped into their horse-drawn wagon and headed to Michael's house to confront Ellen and take her home. Ellen somehow heard about her parents heading her way, so she ran into the cellar of the house to try to hide from them. Once her father, Thomas, arrived, he ran down into the cellar, chased her outside, took her and threw her over a fence, and then threw her into his wagon. Thomas then jumped into the back of his wagon and began violently stomping on his daughter for a little while before jumping to the front and heading off home, with Ellen laying battered and bloodied in the back of her parents' wagon. While all of this was happening, James and his brother Michael had been in downtown Janesville doing some carpentry work on one of the local churches.
Oh, there we go. Did the father have like a known history of abuse?
I think so, in that I think I found some stuff in Ireland where he had been accosted on
Right,
stuff.
you've told me about this.
And so, yeah, I mean, they've done like a heap of hurt beforehand, and yes, I believe that he was chronically violent.
Yeah, I remember that you had found that. Yeah, he basically apparently was not a nice guy, and you know, if you crossed him, he didn't care who you were. He was going to, think about it. He throws her over the fence, throws her in the wagon, then stomps her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, if you're going to stomp your daughter, this is not the first time he's hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and we're aware of this because your mother's when we were back there, she found this whole story.
Well, no, I already had one piece of the story. I actually gave the Rockville story, the second newspaper article, which they didn't have.
That's right.
I found it.
Yeah, that's what I said. You found the story.
Yeah, but not in Janesville. I found it online.
I know. Yeah.
Chronicling America.
Yeah.
Love that site. But by the way, this is a really cool way that you're visualizing this with the kind of what are
bird's
those?
eye.
Yeah, bird's eye map.
Yeah, bird's eye.
Thank you. So this was the part where I was really meticulous about. I had to double check everything in terms of where the houses were and the streets, because some of the street names changed, and then especially figuring out where the Gaffeys lived. I couldn't find records where they actually lived, but I figured it out based on one of the witnesses in the trial who testified that she lived across the street from them, and then I found her husband listed in the 1876 Janesville directory, and that's how I was able to figure out the house. But this was the part that
research just to find that one visual. That's one weird thing about being a history tuber is like you'll get sucked down one particular thing and it might only show up for like 10 seconds, and it's like you did all of this work for 10 seconds of footage. But that's really cool to see.
Thank you.
A woman who had seen what was happening at Michael's house went and told James that he'd better go and do something, otherwise Ellen might be dead. James started running, trying to find a police officer, and eventually came upon Officer J.J. Comstock. James pleaded with the officer to come with him to Kemet's house so they could get his wife Ellen, because he was afraid that her parents were going to kill her. Officer Comstock actually knew both families, and especially with Thomas Kemet having served as the U.S. Postmaster in Janesville for many years. So the officer went, got a proper warrant for the arrest of Thomas Kemet, and then went to Thomas Kemet's house to confront him. Officer Comstock informed Thomas that he had a warrant for his arrest and that he was going to also be taking Ellen home to her husband. At which point Thomas tried to strike Ellen again, but Officer Comstock was able to stop him. Officer
He tried to attack her while the police officer's there. This
Well,
guy.
when he attacked her at the Gaffey house, there were people outside that were just, it was middle of the day.
Yeah,
And they were
like
Yeah.
But when you have an officer right there telling you you're under arrest for attacking your daughter, and then he's like, okay, well, I might as well get another attack in while I still can.
Yeah, no, this is not a stable individual.
Yeah.
Comstock and Thomas eventually agreed that the officer would take Ellen home and then come back to the Kemet residence, where Thomas would then follow in his own wagon to the police court. Once the officer came back from dropping off Ellen, they both started to head out to the police court, but Thomas took off ahead of the officer. Thomas arrived at court before the officer and noticed James Gaffey and his brother Michael standing at the bottom of the steps leading up to the court talking to another man. Thomas hopped out of his wagon and started to chase James and his brother up the steps, yelling, "I've got you now, you son of a bitch." About 3/4 of the way up the steps, Thomas was able to grab a hold of James' legs and then hit him in the small of the back. But James was still holding his carpentry hammer from the work earlier, and he started to hit Thomas in the head with it. Officer Comstock arrived just moments after the attack had begun and was able to step in and separate them for just a little bit. Thomas, covered in blood, continued to chase James into the court, punching and kicking at him, yelling that he was going to kill him. Once things calmed down, it was apparent James had gravely injured Thomas. So they sent for Dr. Henry Palmer, who had experience with serious injuries as he had been a surgeon throughout the Civil War, including in York, Pennsylvania during the Gettysburg Campaign. Dr. Palmer dressed Thomas's wounds, but quickly realized that these injuries might be fatal. An arrest warrant was issued for James Gaffey, who turned himself in and was then quickly released. Thomas was not recovering from his injuries. And by May 20th, 3 days after the fight, Thomas's friends hired an attorney to take a dying declaration, to which Thomas told them that he would not have his dying declaration taken until he got better. He never got better, and he would die 2 days later. Thomas's friends.
I don't know if you guys could hear that, but Mom said,
This is cool. I have not seen this article. So
I found about 7 or 8 different articles related to this, so I'm hoping that some of the others might be new to you as well. So
it probably will be. I only know of the two big articles about the inquiry. So everything else would be new.
He would not have his dying declaration taken until he got well. Okay.
buddy, do you know what a dying declaration is?
This is somebody who's not in his right mind, shall we say.
It sounds like he wasn't in his right mind most of his life.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Friends hired an attorney to take a dying declaration, to which Thomas told them that he would not have his dying declaration taken until he got better. He never got better, and he would die 2 days later on May 22nd, 1876. Ellen was also gravely injured from her father's attack, much worse than a lot of people believed at first, with many believing for a short time that Ellen might die as well. The doctor who attended to Ellen reported that almost her entire body showed marks of extreme violence. Word quickly spread around town about what Thomas had done to his daughter, leading to a petition going around town calling for Thomas to be hung. But after Thomas died from his injuries, the petition became pointless. The same day that Thomas died, a jury was selected to determine how.
One question on that last thing is.
Yeah.
Can't quite. Well, I can read that. Paper was circulated Monday. I'm trying favor of hanging. Okay, so it's not actually saying how, but the thing with it, this is in the 1870s, right?
1876.
1876. So yeah, that's basically a lynch petition.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, they're calling for his lynching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know what those look like. I've looked at a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not calling for a judicial hearing and a set execution date. They're calling for his removal from jail immediately and hanging.
Yep.
So that's kind of interesting. Like,
But
he might die, but if he doesn't, let's kill him anyways.
Injuries, the petition became pointless. The same day that Thomas died, a jury was selected to determine how he died by examining the body and hearing from a few witnesses. The jury concluded that
It's a coroner's jury.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the standard coroner's jury.
Yeah.
So
This is the first article that was widely known.
Yeah.
This particular one.
Yeah, so a coroner's jury is actually how the law still functions. If somebody is suspected to have died of unnatural causes, especially if it is listed, if somebody dies without natural causes being listed on the death certificate by a medical practitioner, and this is actually a law that goes all the way back to. I should probably change the because I kind of specialize in this. Yeah, because that's something that really bugs me a lot of the time, is that there's a lot of people who will talk about, like, back on the frontier days when there was no law to be had. And it's like, no, this is the standard that we've had since literally the namesake of my cat, King Richard the First. So since his reforms in 1296 or something like that, we've had these coroner juries. This is how the law functions even to this day. And so if somebody is suspected to have been died under unnatural causes, and now it requires an actual medical practitioner's note to be considered medical causes, a coroner's jury is summoned. This can literally just be grabbing people off the street, and I do mean, like, literally you'll just send the sheriff around grabbing people, and then you just stand around the body going, that looks like a hammer hole. Yep, that's a hammer hole, all right.
I think he died from that hammer hole. And I think somebody probably hit him with a hammer.
And then they decide whether or not to pursue the case. And that can either be found, they can come to a unified verdict that, well, obviously he died from a self-defense case, which is what's going to happen here, obviously. Or, as in justified homicide is the correct verdict. But they will then, if it is not justified homicide, and if they decided that this was murder or something like that, they could put the blame on somebody and then issue a arrest warrant and then have the sheriff go and follow that arrest warrant, or they can send it to be an open question, and that's when detectives get involved.
Yeah, died at the hands of person or persons unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then you start having to deal with detectives. Right. We've largely obfuscated that part of a coroner's jury to police departments and the FBI. I mean, the FBI is basically just a federal detective agency, but it used to be all of that used to be very private. That you just, hey, the guy down the street's really good with puzzles. Let's just have him do it. But that used to be pretty informal, but like you always had to bring a jury together to get arrest warrants.
So, anyways, that's what that is.
And this is how it functioned in the Wild West, which I hate how much I have to explain. It was not ever that. There was always law.
And I do want to point out one interesting connection, which you may have already seen, having already had access to this, but the police justice who's heading this, the justice is L.F. Patton.
Yep. Oh, that's right.
Right there. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I remember when we were reading this the first time that it was L.F. Patton. Yeah, it's like, yep, okay. I have no idea whether it's a relative or not, but
you can't get rid of us, even when you're on the wrong side of that family tree. We're always there.
Yep.
All right, where's my mouse? There it is.
Thomas had died due to being hit with a hammer, so James Gaffey was rearrested for manslaughter charges and pleaded not guilty by self-defense. At this point in the research, my hope was that I'd be able to find the actual court records to see the entire trial, but unfortunately that just did not happen. After contacting multiple
But you said that the coroner's jury found that he was that it was an instance of self-defense, right?
No, it was manslaughter.
They
found man-
they issued a warrant for manslaughter for him.
Yeah.
So he had already been arrested on assault charges after the action happened. And then he was rearrested on the manslaughter charges after the coroner's jury.
Okay, so there would have been a trial.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about to look into.
Mhm.
court clerks in Rock County, multiple historical societies, genealogical societies, archives, and libraries. Nobody knew where the 19th century criminal cases were being held. So if anyone's around Rock County, Wisconsin, and you know where those 19th century criminal case records are, let us know. Luckily, the Janesville Weekly Gazette covered the trial in depth and even discussed a lot of the actual testimony. The trial started the day after Thomas's death and involved many interesting characters. The Rock County District Attorney prosecuting the case was John Wesley Sales, who'd been serving as DA for about 3 years. James Gaffey's defense attorney was Pliny Norcross, a Civil War veteran who was elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly just a year after coming home from the war in 1866. Norcross was actually serving as the city attorney for Janesville at the time, having previously served as the Rock County DA from 1870 to 1874. Multiple witnesses were called the first day of trial, including Michael Gaffey. Michael testified about what he saw outside the police court. I saw Kemet coming with a double team toward us. I told my brother he had better get out of the way. He said nothing. I started up the stairs and he followed me. I got to the top and my brother about 2/3 of the way. I looked around and saw Kemet pull my brother back, holding him by the legs, and struck him on the small of the back. And my brother then struck back with his hammer, striking Kemet in the head. When he struck the second time, Kemet fell on his side so that his head came between my brother's knees, and he turned round and held Kemet's head between his knees and called for the police. Kemet at the same time and held my brother's knees. Then Comstock, the officer, came and parted them. Michael also testified about a previous encounter.
So that also means that he was despite having struck him twice, but he struck defensively very clearly.
Yeah.
And then he actually just sat there holding Kemet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Holding Kemet like between his knees, just like
Right.
Stop it, just stop.
Yeah. Quit hitting me. Yeah.
So like very clear self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Between Thomas Kemet and James Gaffey. About 2 weeks ago, Kemet came into my house in the 2nd Ward between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. He came in one door and his wife in another. I was in bed. They did not knock or ask to come in. Kemet stayed about a half an hour until my brother James came home. Kemet objected to my brother having anything to do with his daughter and said he would rather see her hung on the gallows than marry him, and then told my brother if he married her, he would shoot him the first time he got his eye on him. After that, Kemet and his wife went away, and in a half an hour after, he returned, showed up in the window, and thrusted a club and threatened me and dared me out. My brother was not in the room at the time. The trial was briefly put on hold until June 14th due to a witness not being...
Yeah.
He's been threatened. He's trespassed. He's burglarized.
I mean, technically, at that point, he was actually within his rights to just shoot the guy.
That's right.
Dang.
Yes.
And also just like saying like, I'd rather have my daughter on the gallows. Like, what the heck, dude?
Just
this was
nasty dude.
yeah, this was not a stable individual.
Yeah.
And
Real piece of work.
And if I remember, and I could be misremembering, but the stuff that I ran into in some of the Irish records was like the whole family was just messed up. It wasn't just him.
Oh, so just like an angry gene, I guess.
Well, if he was the father, he probably, though they stayed married, the Kemet and Gaffey.
Yeah.
Once they got the dad out of the way, it wasn't quite what they wanted.
Well, they were already married. When
Yeah,
all this
they
was-
were already married, but you look at them, they stayed married, they had kids, they lived out their lives.
Yeah,
They,
and there's no like family story of like abuse after that, right?
No,
no. Mm-mm.
From like the Gaffeys.
no.
So I
So-
mean, but if he was this way to her, he was probably that way to other kids in the family and to his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah,
she was not, if she was coming down there and breaking into the house and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very clear pattern when it comes to violent interpersonal violence that
Oh,
it
yeah.
often starts at home.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah. This
there's
was not a happy family.
it's surprising how often, like when it comes to mass shooters, that ones who were of age to have a spouse often are very often abusive to their spouses.
Oh yeah. Well, the bomber in Wisconsin, wasn't it? The first school mass murder.
Oh, Keogh. I'm forgetting his first name. It
Right,
was like John
yeah.
Keogh or something like
But
that.
he murdered
And
his,
that's Michigan.
That's Michigan.
Bath,
But
Michigan.
he murdered his wife first.
Yeah. Well, he murdered his wife and mother
Yeah.
first,
And then blew up the school and all of that. Yeah.
and that's the worst school massacre in U.S. history. Was in 1928, 29, something
Yeah.
like. I know it's before the crash. So,
Right, but it
Y'all
was
are getting a little bit off topic here.
yeah.
but the point is, it was very clear. He'd also like literally because he was a Michigan legislator, and he had actually gotten in several fights on the Michigan
Right.
Congress floor. So like he was a well-known ruffian, and then he just lost a race and decided to blow up the school.
Mhm.
Um,
But anyways, we should go back to this.
well, I
Your
gotta-
mother's right.
I gotta get this. There we go. Sorry, it is funky trying to figure out where the mouse is each time.
Available. But once back in session, the first witness to testify was a man named Herman Russ, who had been talking with the Gaffey brothers at the foot of the steps right before the attack. Herman's testimony was extensive and lasted the entire first half of the day. When they reconvened, the next witness was a man named Richard Forrester, who had worked as a U.S. mailman with Thomas Kemet being his boss. Richard testified that on May 6th, he was speaking with James Gaffey at the Burr Robin Circus, and James said, "If Tom Kemet don't keep away from me and let me alone, I will lay him out." The next witness was Dr. Henry Palmer, who had attended to Thomas Kemet after the attack. Dr. Palmer went into great detail about Thomas Kemet's injuries, which I won't read through in this video because of how gruesome it is, but if you slow this part down, then you can read what the newspaper reported the doctor said. There
Don't
was
want
a
to get
slew of other
demonetized.
witnesses to testify.
Say again?
I was just saying, don't want to get demonetized.
Oh yeah.
19th century newspapers did not pull any punches. They put every detail in there. It's pretty amazing what you can read.
Mhm.
And we don't need to go into it,
Yeah,
but
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
keep this video monetized.
That's Yep.
But yes, it is. The media landscape has changed a great deal since then.
And especially small town newspapers.
Mhm.
They like to fill column inches.
Oop, wrong button. There we go.
But one that really stuck out was a woman named Margaret Poey, who lived across the street from James's brother, Michael Gaffey. Margaret testified about several threats Kemet had said to James Gaffey. She also testified that the night before the attack, Kemet had followed James Gaffey to a local establishment,
She doesn't look
threw a
like-
stone at him, and then jumped over a fence and ran away. One of the last witnesses of the trial was Mary Kemet, wife of Thomas Kemet, mother of Ellen Gaffey, and a witness to much of what had happened prior to the attack. And in my opinion, at least based on what the newspapers reported, an accomplice to her husband Thomas in the assault of their daughter. The newspaper didn't give us much information on her testimony, just really summarizing it as corroborating everything they had already heard from previous witnesses. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled that the testimony had shown James Gaffey had acted in self-defense and was thus not guilty. And something interesting I discovered that might have not even been known at the time that the trial was taking place was that both Ellen and her mother Mary were about 1 to 2 months pregnant during the trial. Ellen would give birth to her first son, William Edward Gaffey, on January 18th, 1877, while Mary would give birth to her last daughter, Sarah Kemet, on January 29th, 1877. James and Ellen would continue to live in Wisconsin for about another 5 years after the trial, but by the early 1880s, they had moved almost 360 miles away to the western side of Iowa. It definitely made me wonder what the family relationship was like after the trial, especially between Ellen and her mother and siblings. I got the feeling that she might have become estranged from the rest of her family, especially considering a lack of newspaper reports of her visiting her siblings or vice versa, but that doesn't prove that there was any estrangement. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see another just like it, be sure to check out this video of mine right here.
Hold on while I swap the tabs around real quick so that we can see everything. If I can find the cursor. There we go. Hold on. There we go. So that's both videos.
That's both videos. Yeah.
And what a fascinating story, right?
Yeah.
I very much love all the details on this. Out of all that paperwork in the Gazette, I only have 2 of those, and I don't think the Rock County Genealogical Society. I think they only had 1 that I already had, so they don't have this stuff either. So good on you for tracking all of that down on
you.
it. I was just going to note that there is a history in the family of the Ellen name. It comes from both sides because it's a really common name for Irish women. But that Ellen goes back hopping generations, 2 more generations earlier than that, and my daughter's middle name is Ellen after my mom. So we've kind of continued it.
Wasn't Ellen's middle name Jane as well?
No,
it's Johanna.
Johanna. I
Yeah,
knew it started with a J.
yeah, no, she's named after her great grandmother's middle name on the other side.
And
Right.
when we were in Janesville, what was the grave that we found back?
The
there?
Kemmets.
Yeah. Okay. So we found their grave.
So the other piece that I think I have tracked down on this is that eventually I just lost her first name. Kemet went to live with a daughter somewhere in Illinois, although she's buried next to her husband and died like 30 years later.
And Mary, the wife, the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although she's buried in Janesville along with another whole kind of little cluster of Kemmets in the cemetery that we went and found and took pictures of everything.
And is Kemet one of the lost names in Ireland?
So where the Kemmets are from is right around County Sligo, right next to County Roscommon, and the Conroy is from somewhere in County Roscommon. I can't remember the name of the town on it, but like by 1901, there are no Kemmets listed in Ireland.
Yeah.
And there was only like 4 families, and they were all clustered together on this in back in the late 1840s. So yeah, it's a weird name. I mean, there's other variations on it,
Well,
but
somebody's
it's the little
somebody's
bit
pointing out pronunciation on that, I think.
on Kemet.
Oh no,
Sligo. Oh, County Sligo.
Okay.
Sligo. Okay.
Thank you.
Learn
Yeah,
how to
that was-
mispronounce it correctly.
John Timer. Timer.
Oh, John Tyner. Yeah, he's one of my regulars. He's a wiki treer. He's actually he lives in Ireland. He's
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, when we were over there, we stayed in Roscommon for a couple of nights. Had a great time there.
And we didn't have any super chats, right?
I didn't see any coming through, but I
didn't
do
see
have
any.
something
Okay,
to share on screen if you want to
Yeah, but
go to that. So
do it.
To
I
bring
didn't
that over here so that we can actually see it.
yeah, let me make it higher. So this is a website where we can basically put in surnames for Ireland, and then it tells us based on the different censuses
Oh,
of where
yeah.
they were. And so the Gaffey family falls very similarly into that area of Roscommon
right.
and Sligo.
Gaffneys are known mostly from Athlone, but my family actually comes from the far eastern edge of County Galway,
Okay.
at least on what I've been able to track on that.
Yeah. So from the help that I received from the community members of mine who are from Ireland, they were saying that Gaffey was a somewhat uncommon name, and that they were, and you can see from the maps, almost all Catholic.
Oh yeah,
So here we
but
have the
look
Anglican.
for the Kemet, and it's like just like almost impossible to find.
He's doing it.
Yeah,
So this is what it looks like, 1901.
yeah. So
Now
there
this
a
is
couple.
this is obviously this spelling,
Mm-hmm.
but then we have patterns. We'll do so we can see the amount. It's very small amounts and mixed spellings.
Yeah,
So-
so it's always made it interesting because I just kind of assume they're all probably related because there's so few to begin with, and the proximity.
Yeah.
And you've got a couple of other ones like that in your background.
None of them that are that small.
No, Kemet's the
Um,
smallest.
But I should note that County Roscommon, the reason we were in that area is County Roscommon is where the National Famine Museum is. And so the Gaffeys, if I remember, came over earlier and originally went to Canada and then came south from there. I could have the wrong family on that. But out of my 8 great grandparents, 6 of them are potato famine refugees.
Yes. And I highly recommend, if you go to Ireland, if you can, go to the National Famine Museum. It's well worth seeing. And be sure you take a look at the recreated coffin ship at Dublin. It's a great tour to take, because it's the only coffin ship that the one that they rebuilt. It's the only one nobody actually ever died on any of the crossings. Even when it sank, the crew was rescued from it. Nobody died on that. It's a great part of Irish history to get a chance to see. We had a great time when we went to Ireland.
And Dad's
Hope you go
never
back.
short of
Recommendations
museum
from museums. Yeah.
So
After 44 years, you got to keep pushing.
So in conclusion with everything, did you want to say about like what project you're working on now and everything?
Well, I mean, I've got a few things going on at this point. The way that I'm doing these episodes is I have a slew of guests, a rotating wheel of guests, I guess you could say. And so there will be more episodes on your family coming out eventually. So more lines. Right now, the 2 episodes I have in mind is looking into the Young family, which your dad already sent me a whole bunch of stuff Thank you,
Oh,
Mark,
yeah.
on that. And then also the Coffee family, which you also mentioned with that very interesting Tennessee history. But then I'm also working on a couple of episodes for Max Miller from Tasting History with Max Miller. Probably have another episode coming up on Steve Heimler of Heimler's History. And eventually at some point I will finally get the episode out on Cynthia Reyes, who is a Mexican scientist YouTuber. All of her videos are in Spanish, and so I don't know how many people are watching this that actually recognize her, but her family is from Jalisco, Mexico, but we have an Italian ancestor of hers where we have some records saying where they're coming from in Italy. So that's been one I've been working on for years, that her brother did DNA and all that, and it's tough. It's tough. So constant episodes coming out, hoping to start getting up to one a month. So, but as you mentioned, confirming every little bit when I do these, as I'm writing the script, every little piece, when I say a birth, a death, anything, I go and I'm like, wait a second, let me just double check what record I have on that. And especially sometimes it's index records. And when I'm going through, if it's just an index, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can find the actual image somehow. So some of these records were some of those of trying to, having that index, like especially in the Wisconsin records, the marriages and births and things like that, they're very hit or miss in Rock County and Walworth County in the 1800s. And it seemed that, I'd find births on some family members and then the next sibling, no birth record. So, yeah.
Well, look forward to that. Everybody who wants to go and check out the 2 videos that we watched today, they are linked below in the description in my video. I know there's some folks watching on your channel as well. But be sure to go and check out his channel, because obviously it is not only dedicated to my family.
I can't understand why not.
I mean, who else is more important? But in terms of news on my channel, I am taking a bit of a break for the next couple of months. I will be only releasing 1 video a month for the next couple months. So while I'm not, taking a complete hiatus, really what I'm doing is just trying to build up my buffer again so that I can be able to trickle them out without having to rush. But I will still be doing the weekly game stream on Twitch and that. Though not next week, because that'll be New Year's. Not doing that on New Year's.
It'd probably be one of your more interesting ones.
I will be playing some games, just not those games. Got some Cards Against Humanity right over there that I got to take with. That was a Christmas present. But that's what's going on my channel. This was super interesting, though. So thanks for doing this. This is really cool to see.
Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this. I truly appreciate that, because I know when it comes to putting family history out there and stuff, sometimes people are a little hesitant. So I appreciate that, and especially doing the DNA tests and
When it comes to, I mean, Dad's already a public figure and all that. Mom's basically a public figure because she's a professor. So, yeah. And you got it out just in time for me to be home with the family.
Yeah, this worked out perfectly. I'm super happy you all did this. So thank you for doing this reaction as well.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, this was.
So for those who might have only come in at the end, you always have to wrap up one of these things by saying what you've already done, which is we watched 2 videos pertaining to the genealogy of my family. Right here is my dad, Mark, and my mom, Colleen. I am, once again, Joe Hall-Patton, and these 2 videos, the first one was about the Patton side of the family. So Dad's side, they got their name combined when they married. I had no choice in the matter. And the next one wasn't about the Halls, but about a particular troublesome instance between the Gaffeys and the Kemmets in on mom's side of the family, where one ended up having to, in self-defense, smash the other guy over the head with a hammer, and eventually kill him. You know, I study American violence. Funny. But we also learned a little bit about why DNA and how that functions, and a little bit my specific setup, and where your channel is going and everything.
Yeah.
I hope everybody had a good time. And I see we haven't had any new super chats, so we can actually end this without having to do any super chats. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy holidays, all.
All right.